Welcome to Jonathan Beeler, LPC. Gabriel, what's the question?
All right. What is the uniqueness of pastoral ministry?
Pastoral ministry, unlike secular jobs, is a unique profession in that, there's really not a set hour. A person is working pastoral ministry 24/7. They can have office hours, but they're still working even at home. There's a spiritual aspect to this that we don't fight against flesh and blood. Pastors, the spiritual warfare, as soon as you begin to get into the pastorate, you start seeing the uniqueness of spiritual warfare, which creates a lot of interesting effects on the emotions, the family, communication with parishioners, members. That is a huge factor when it comes to pastoring. It affects every part of the individual. And also, this is the surprise reality of pastoring. You could go for a couple of days with not much going on, but you're still carrying the load of the burden of people's burdens and things going on in the pastorate. But when you go back into the ministry, and there are a lot of demands. You have the demands of studying and preparing messages, which is a huge demand because you've been called by God to preach, proclaim the word, and rightly divide the word. Also, you're responsible for the committees, the different ministries, making sure people that go to hospitals and whatnot, and that's a huge burden on especially a young pastor, but any pastor, because we're human beings. I think there's another sense, thirdly, that pastors the sense of inadequacy. I don't think you were ever fully adequate. We're all sinful. Pastors struggle with sin just like anyone else. And, I think if you feel adequate, there's something wrong there. But you can also feel too much inadequacy where your self-esteem, your view of yourself, your family, not having good boundaries, protecting you and your family, it creates a lot of anxiety. It creates a lot of possibly depression, and the sense of comparing yourself. Now, we can sit here and say we don't, but behind closed doors, if you really talk to a pastor and they're honest, they're always comparing themselves. We pastors, compare themselves to Pastor John up the road, whose ministry is 2,000 members, right? We don't always see what's on the other side. We always, we think, God must have shown special favor to them. And here my congregation's only got 40 people. And I think that is a very difficult thing. I think it's hard to put that in perspective sometimes. And it's really overwhelming to a young pastor or any pastor for that matter. I think the next one is critics and bullies. This is extremely common. Not only, this kind of goes along with the spiritual warfare too. Satan likes to send people that say they're sheep and they may even bow, but they're really not. They're goats. Even Christians can fall into this as well. The bullies, the critics, unintentionally, some of them intentionally, some of them unintentionally, will say, "Hey, Pastor, that's a good sermon, but, right?" And to the pastor, that's really, really cuts him off at the knees, because that's where, that's his profession, is proclaiming the word. And I think the other thing is, the fact the bullies, you always will have a bully, whether it's a deacon, whether it's an elder, whether it's a person in a committee. The pastor's dealing with this, plus trying to preach the word, plus trying to keep peace, plus trying to make everyone happy, and yet not compromise the word of God. Yet he's concerned about feeding his family and the need to have tithes up, yet he's not wanting to compromise the word of God. And that's extremely difficult because the word of God is offensive. And so it is very difficult to work that out. You struggle with the balancing out, getting paid to provide for your family, preaching the Word of God and the truth, standing up against false teaching and sin. And the pastor is often in depression, in struggles and anxiety, wrestling with those two between the family and provision as well as preaching the Word. And I think the last but not least is loneliness. If you look back in the Old Testament, you know, the prophets of old, the true prophets who preached the truth, preached against sin, preached the truth about who God is, they struggled with depression, whether it's Moses or Jeremiah or even David, the psalmist, or others. They struggled with depression and loneliness. I know Elijah, he went up into a cave and just said, God, just take me. I'm the last one left. And I think that's normal. It's normal because it's such an unpopular message to preach the Word of God. But it's not good, and God doesn't want us to be that way. If you see in Elijah specifically, God gave him food, gave him rest, and then gave him a fresh revelation of the Spirit, and then sent him back out. I think it's important that pastors face the reality of these complex issues in their life. And so this brings back, what am I bringing this up for in regards to therapy? I know pastors have like DOMs, they have pastors of their denomination, but I also realize that there's no guarantee that there's confidentiality with this. So pastors really don't feel open to talk about their problems or their insecurities or their pain or even some of the sins they're struggling with. So therefore, I think that professional counseling, especially with a Christian therapist that knows the Bible as well as the clinical aspects to therapy and the psyche, is important for pastors. They need this. I would even recommend before they need it. Counseling can be helpful with adjustment disorders. It can be helpful with depression. It can be helpful with talking things out. And professional counseling, if you have insurance, is not that much, not too expensive. Whether it's a $25 copay, maybe a little more, it allows that pastor to talk about things that he can't talk about in other areas. And there's the ethics of that it's confidential. It doesn't leave the office unless there's something going to hurt that pastor or someone else. And therefore, I think it's important for pastors to find a professional counselor, therapist who has a background in pastoring, has a background in the Bible, and also has a background in the psychology and the emotions of things. And so I happen to be an LPC, background in the Bible, and pastored for several years. I still speak every now and then at churches, do mission trips all over the world. But my profession is professional counseling right now. And so, pastors, I welcome you to look me up, Jonathan Beeler, LPC. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'd be glad to help you. I have a couple offices where I work, and help you to the best of my knowledge by the grace of God. Thank you.